Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on this November 1st. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Now, you know that these videos are pre-recorded, which is the way we show them on Facebook Premiere. Now, the upside is that today is Halloween. I'm recording this on Saturday evening. So that's wonderful. It's way fun. The downside is we have kids coming to our door. And that means we have 3 dogs who just go crazy. So if you hear barking in the background, let's focus on the fact that our theme this month is gratitude, and try to feel gratefulness for all of it if we can. So again, as I said, our topic for this month is going to be gratitude. And I can just hear you thinking, what is she about? Here we are in the midst of noise and acrimony and national division and chaos. We are 2 days before the most divisive and consequential presidential election probably in our history, and we are supposed to be thinking about gratitude. Well, my answer to that is yes. It is a perfect time to be thinking about gratitude and to consider how the energy of gratitude is going to see us through these waters as we navigate forward. Gratitude is a way of seeing the world. It's a way of living that keeps our hearts connected with the holy around us, that keeps our hearts connected to the truth of the holy in us. As Marcus Cicero taught, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others. It leads us to places, to understandings that nothing else does. It opens our hearts, our understanding, and our awareness. It imbues our lives with joy and hope and grace, and I think we could all use more of those. So how does a life lived in the energy of gratitude do all this? I think because it so profoundly reflects the truth that even in the midst of burden and of difficulty, we know that the good remains, and we make the choice to see it. Not to ignore the rest of it. It's not a Pollyanna thing, but to see the entire picture. Gratitude transforms us from victims to co-creators. It transforms us into actors with a plan. Instead of leaving us clenched up in fear and anger, it opens our hearts to healing and to wonder and to hope. One of my resources in preparing this talk was Brother David Steindl-Rast's excellent book, Gratefulness, the Heart of Prayer. For those of you who are not familiar with the work of Brother David, I encourage you to read it or go to his website, which is gratefulness.org. Brother David is a Benedictine monk. He was born in 1926 in Vienna, Austria. He experienced the horrors of the Anschluss as a teenager. He was drafted into Hitler's army. He escaped and emigrated to the US. He's the co-founder of the Center for Spiritual Studies and the recipient of the 1975 Martin Buber Award for his achievements in building bridges between faith traditions. His June 2013 TED Talk is entitled, Want to Be Happy, Be Grateful. It's wonderful. I encourage you to watch it. He's written many books, and he currently serves a worldwide network for grateful living through his interactive website. Brother David calls gratefulness the spontaneous response of the human heart to the gratuitously given. And he teaches that all we have is gratuitously given. He writes, what counts on your path to fulfillment is that we remember the great truth that moments of surprise want to teach us. Everything is gratuitous. Everything is a gift. The degree to which we are awake to this truth is the measure of our gratefulness. Gratitude is not limited to being thankful for a gift you just got. It's an attitude of the heart that enriches us with a willingness to see the good, sometimes even before it appears. In the Christian Gospels, there are 24 instances in which Jesus prays in public, and half of them are prayers of thanksgiving. One example is the story in Matthew 15 of Jesus feeding the 4,000. This is how it goes. Then Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for the crowd, because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the road. The disciples said to him, where are we going to get enough bread in the desert to feed so large a crowd? What did they see? They saw no food, or not a lot of food, a desert, and a big crowd. This was lack. How is this going to work out? Jesus asked them, How many loaves have you? They said 7, and a few small fish. This is not going to work, they were thinking. Then, ordering the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all of them ate and were filled, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Those who had eaten were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Okay, so we don't need to get hung up on the historicity of this. This is one of those instances where we can say, I don't know if this happened, but it's true nonetheless. What did Jesus do? He completely ignored those around him who saw only the hunger and the lack, who knew for a fact that 7 loaves and a couple fish would never feed everybody. He knew the greater fact, the higher truth, that God's abundance surrounded them, and he gave thanks knowing that it would appear and meet their needs. He approached this event knowing that the good was to come, and he expressed gratitude with that certainty in his heart. He made a choice. I don't know about you, but so often in my life I have waited until I saw what was coming before I decided if I wanted to be grateful or not. I made it a deal, not a gift. What I was saying was, I'll wait and see what you deliver before I give you my gratitude. I reserved the right to be grateful or ungrateful unless what showed up met my preconception of my greater good. So how arrogant is that? I know what makes me happy in the moment, what avoids pain for me right then, but do I know what lessons a particular event is going to bring? I really don't. Most of us right now, or many of us, are going through very stressful and difficult times. Our nation collectively surely is going through a difficult and stressful time. And we can't see over the coming horizon to know what is down the road. But we express gratitude for the good because we know it is there, even if we don't see it right in front of us. I remember the poem written during World War II by an unknown Jew in hiding from the Nazis in Cologne, Germany, in a cellar. He or she wrote, I believe in the sun, even when it is not shining. And I believe in love, even when there's no one there. And I believe in God, even when he is silent. Imagine the fear and the despair that soul in hiding must have felt, knowing it was more likely than not that what was coming was deprivation, privation, and death. And yet, we see such a beautiful affirmation of faith and determination and hope. Gratitude affirms that this gift of creation is good, even if we humans have done all within our power to muck it up. The truth remains that it is good. With gratitude, we exercise our power of choice. We see hope when we might just as well cave into fear. We know God is in all our moments, and we choose to act from that place. In his book, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace Wattles wrote that the soul is always grateful that lives in closer connection to God. He wrote that the mental attitude of thankfulness draws the mind into closer touch with the source from which our blessings come. It is when we are in touch with that source, that unadulterated love, that our lives will transform. It is gratitude that keeps us connected to the power of source. As I thought about that, I remembered those moments when I felt most connected to spirit, and I invite you to do the same. What state of your heart opened you to that connection? What energy was at work in you that made you, even for a moment, that open channel to the divine? What led you to that feeling of connection, wholeness, oneness, and balance? For me, it is always the energy of gratitude, not gratitude for a specific thing, but gratitude for being here, for every moment, for the healing, for the joy that is to come. For those who knew her, remember Reverend Sidney, whenever she would pray for somebody who was sick or facing surgery, she would always close the prayer with gratitude for the healing to come. She knew that it would. She didn't always know what it would look like, but she knew that it would come. What wisdom. These lessons come at such a useful time as we look out at a scary and uncertain world. There is so much hatred, division, violence, and threat of violence. In addition to a world increasingly more violent, we anticipate the events surrounding our upcoming election. Who knows what next week will bring? Every time we look at the news, it just gets more dramatic, more polarized, more fear, building upon fear upon fear. It's at times like this that I look around and I am so grateful for communities like One World, communities that exist in the belief that we are all one and our highest calling is to love. In the face of fear and despair and desperate measures, we continue to speak of compassion and peace, a welcoming of differences, and the need to love. So why do we do this? Many would just call us delusional, would accuse us of seeking to hide from events here, at home, and around the world, that we insulate ourselves by our focus on what? Happy thinking, happy thoughts. That's not it. They say we're just kidding ourselves, that we need to put down our organic tea, turn off the meditation music, and wake up to the fact that the world is a cold, hard, violent place. Isn't that ironic? We are on a path to awakening, but not to that. Instead, our path is to a truth that transcends all violence, all division, all man-made constructs of separation that keep us divided. Our definition of awakening is just very different. We know why we keep our focus on the truth that matters and why we continue to speak of the eternal and living truths of love, forgiveness, and compassion. We know that conflict will never create peace. We cannot fear ourselves, hate ourselves into a peaceful world. Uncertain times like now are the exact times to remember these truths and to have the courage to speak them. As Wayne Mueller asks, will we be awake and alive? Will we be courageous in speaking to what we know to be true? These truths we know are not limited to times of convenience, times when we're feeling fine and unchallenged. Principles of love, peace, forgiveness are strong enough to see us through fearful times, through challenging times, and indeed, they are the only values that will. The universe is powered by love, which always overcomes fear. As A.J. Musti wrote, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. This is why I'm so glad that we are focusing this month on gratitude, on the notion that the world is an abundant, wonderful place for which we should continually give thanks. It is, it still is, even in the midst of violence and uncertainty. Those are challenges we face for sure, but they do not diminish the truth that we know. They only tell us that our job is not yet done. Does this mean we do nothing in the face of threat and violence? No, we protect ourselves and the values that we cherish. We pray and we work that the causes of division and hatred can be healed, that justice can prevail, that we may be reconciled. Sometimes when we read the news, this looks like such a tall order, but we know it is possible. We know that hearts can change because each of us has seen it. A sense of gratitude for all of it leads us into the place where our hearts begin to open, where we make the choice not to fear. We are grateful because we know that God is in it all, and therefore we have nothing to fear. It gives us the means to see the movement of spirit, even the potential movement of spirit in all the circumstances of our lives. A heart focused on gratitude is even more necessary in hard times when life's gifts may not be so apparent. I'm reminded of a story I told you before. I'm going to say it again because I think it so applies. It arises out of the dark days of the Great Depression and a group of ministers challenged as to how to bring messages of hope in those times. The year was 1929, and there was a group of ministers in New York who were working to craft a Thanksgiving message in the midst of the Great Depression. They gathered to discuss what they should do, what they should say during their Sunday services on Thanksgiving. Things were about as bad as they could get. There was no sign of relief. The bread lines were depressingly long. The stock market had just completely tanked. And the term Great Depression was a great description for the mood of the country. So the ministers thought that they should only lightly touch on the subject of Thanksgiving in deference to the human misery all around them. After all, what was there to be thankful for? Nothing. But one of them, Dr. William Steiger, he was pastor of a large congregation in the city. He said no. He rallied the group. This was not the time, he suggested, to give mere passing mention to Thanksgiving. Just the opposite. This was the time for the nation to get matters in perspective and thank God for blessings always present, but perhaps unseen. They were right. The most intense moments of thankfulness are not found in times of plenty, but when difficulties abound. Think of the Pilgrims, that first Thanksgiving, that first winter. Half their number dead, men, women, and children without a country, but still there was thanksgiving to God. Their gratitude was not for things that they had, but in a greater possibility, a greater hope, a new freedom, a new home. It was that same sense of gratitude that led Abraham Lincoln to formally establish the first Thanksgiving Day in the midst of our national civil war, when the butcher's list of casualties seemed to have no end, and the very nation struggled for survival. The world is a holy place, all of it. Too often we've been taught that the world is divided into the sacred and what many call the profane or the worldly. We have our regular times during the week, and then on a particular day at the appointed time, we go to church or temple or synagogue or mosque, or we tune in nowadays because we don't go there, and we participate in the holy. When we're done, we're strengthened for our jump back into the worldly as we leave that building or that time, and we just leave the holy behind and go back out to our regular lives. Not so. We here know that God is not only in certain places at certain times. As Henry Nouwen said, the spiritual life does not remove us from the world, but leads us deeper into it. There is no distinction between the sacred and the rest of life. This world, all of it, is a holy place. It is that awareness that moves us beyond theology, beyond theory, to practice, to real life, and to awakening. It's not just a holy place when all is going well. It's a more pleasant place for sure. It's a more fun place, but it's difficult times that call us to grow, that demand that we show up as who we deeply are. Those are gifts as well, perhaps greater gifts. Every day is a new opportunity entirely unearned to learn to love, to reach out, to find new dimensions to our connection with spirit. Malcolm Muggeridge writes, all happenings, great and small, are parables whereby God speaks. The art of life is to get the message. Gratitude opens us up to God's message in all events. So what does that mean for us here? It means we continue to live life gratefully and joyfully, navigating the challenges with the help of spirit, our practices, and each other. So right now, we are headed into what is for many a challenging time. As I said earlier, we're facing a week which is scary, which is uncertain, and we don't know how things are going to turn out. I invite you this week to consider and start a gratitude practice that speaks to you and use it this month. In the past, what have we done? We've used gratitude journals where we pick one thing from each day we're grateful for and we write 5 or 6 sentences about it. I've heard that that is more effective in terms of just letting us ponder deeply what we're grateful for than picking 5 things and writing 1 sentence about each. It permits us to focus more deeply on one event, to look at it from different angles, to truly discern where our gratitude lies in relation to that one event. Or take a gratitude walk. Focus on your walk, on the beauty and the wonder around you. Tell friends or loved ones that you are grateful for them, whether they agree with you politically or not. This can be a challenge. If they don't, and their beliefs make you mad, list 5 things about them that you are grateful for anyway. Don't make that one thing the whole picture. Find ways to discern and appreciate the good in your life and give thanks for it. On our Wednesday calls, we can share what we've done and what we've found. In her book, The Places That Scare You, Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron writes, "We can let the circumstances of our lives harden us so that we become increasingly resentful and afraid, or we can let them soften us and make us kinder and more open. We always have this choice." It is a choice. We can choose fear, or we can decide to choose compassion, courage, and love. These are the gifts of a life lived in the energy of gratitude for all of it. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate again you joining us today.